perhaps the best thing is, what about if we go there and write what comes to our mind as a conclusion, and then we gather it in a picture or something, and we perhaps can keep the discussion going to the
the project, because I mean this idea of working towards a technoethics book, regardless of also other outputs that theoretically we can produce, and thinking also about our practices, how are we really responding or not from the practices we are experiencing also in the media lab, in the streets and so on. So like a meta kind of reflection on the project itself. I mean, we have had these days quite a number of major topics that could be, like, let's say, chapters or threads of such a book. If you feel like some people did the other day, just throw them on the board. I have, of course, questions as well. You can also type them in the screen. I think one major issue which we have been kind of assuming, not quite discussing, but which is, I think, quite crucial in terms of taking a step further what technoethics might be nowadays for major institutions, for the EU, for whatever, for what people think that media do, is to work, we're working not so much on the content, or sure not only on the content of media, but on their actual infrastructure, the perceptual infrastructure they mobilize on the form, so to speak. So this McLuhan-esque kind of turn, let's say the medium is the message, okay, but we're taking that very seriously and exploring its implications very, very deeply, like saying, well, it's not just about, let's say, the ethics of television is not just about whether you have violent images being shown on it, but the actual violence, so to speak, of the actual interface, the perceptual apparatus, how it is fixing you as a spectator, how is it reproducing perspectival vision and generating an ontological divide between the subject and what is seen behind. So to think media is never neutral, so we have the assumption in the culture that technology is neutral. I would like to quote a phrase from the Invisible Committee, this Tikkun, Tikkun, and the Comité Invisible. Well, it's a collective, an anonymous collective. And they propose to think of technologies, or techniques as opposed to technology as the neutralizing framework. So technology can never be a neutral kind of universal framework. Let's mobilize techniques, particular techniques, as opposed to this universal framework of a neutral technology, which is never true. It's a political fiction. So demystifying that neutrality of technology is the first major chapter, I think, for technoethics. Like saying technology has ontological status in terms of it's giving form to our relationalities, to how we live in the world. So we have to be active part of that process. We have to transform the interface. We have to operate at the infrastructural level of how perception is being and movement is being mobilized in technology. That would be, I think, for me, one crucial point, which we have kind of assumed here because we kind of probably agree that that's it or not. But I think that would be a major starting point.
I think many of the talks were in relation to that. For instance, Beatrice Pitcher was precisely talking about, well, this is the procedure, and the procedure means something. And also, in relation to this white book, I think it is very important, something that many of you have pointed out, but I think in a very clear way, Federica, yesterday, ethics is about also can't be treated as a universal thing, can't be treated as a universal thing. So the location of it and so some sort of explanation as also regarding how we deal not just with this but with data and with emotions, because emotions are central to the medium. So
Yeah, another big chapter for the book I would suggest on affects and emotions and so forth, like questioning, again, the universality of certain emotional constructs, as we have seen, that are Willian model and so on. But even the issue of how, as I was mentioning, how fear is engineered, for example, and how that then affords all these discourses about the need for security, justifying big data frameworks, and so forth. That would be, for sure, another main chapter I would suggest.
I would love to hear from you, because this was supposed to be an unconference, so there is a bit of undermining of authority.
I was just wondering, after hearing all the talks, if talking about big data as a category is useful, because what we have seen in these 2 days is like we can talk about big data in many different ways, and we can focus on many different aspects, from the processing of data to thinking about the ontology of data or the epistemology of data, but also thinking about the problems of ownership and privacy, or problems about, there's a whole myriad of things related to big data. So I don't know if it's really useful category to encompass all these different things in just one topic, or it would be more useful to just focus on some of the aspects or some of the problems. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I don't see big data as a topic, more like a paradigm that is transforming all those topics. For me, it's like a turning point, a revolutionary turning point that is transforming all those topics. I wouldn't see it as a topic. Okay, yeah, we can just speak about, the issue of time in technology, the issue of movement and body in technology, the issue of perception, the issue of public or privacy, of a comment, and then, of course, it's not just big data. We are analyzing, if we talk about technoethics, we have to speak about writing, about language, about all other technology. That would be another, like if we start with fundamentals, another big issue to pinpoint is to say, well, technology, again, because when people say, oh, technology is just a digital model, of course not. And to say technology is, language, it's writing, and all of them have to be questioned, of course. Now, when we speak about big data, that would be a part of the thing. It's, for me, it's a turning point, but never forgetting the many, many other layers that are also being affected by the big data paradigm. Also, writing is being affected by it. But
genomics, pharmaceuticals, all of those are part of the emerging technologies.
Yeah, we could speak of one of the big, Roy Ascott, this visionary of media arts, was speaking years ago of, we are now in the middle of the Big Bang, bits, atoms, neurons, and genes, which are the 4 major topics, not the only ones of so-called convergent technologies, whereby I think the bits part, the Big Bang data part, is the binding element of the neurosciences, the nanotechnologies, the genetics, the informational element is the binding aspect, possibly. But it's a very unlimited field for what.
Should I say something about why I put that up? Or not? Just I'm trying to encapsulate what I've sort of been thinking about, or what the whole Unconference has sort of brought up about media. And I mean, like you said, everything from television to the internet seems to, in my perception, everything seems to amplify from the id. In other words, people on the internet want to emote more and more. Television is escalating the amount of violence year by year. All the shows, Game of Thrones has gotten so violent that I simply stopped watching it. So the id is escalating through media, but there's a de-escalation of the ID, the personal identity. Id, as in Freudian id. Ego. It amplifies the id. And people use it for that, I think, too, thinking that they will make themselves more personally amplified. For instance, on Facebook, people think, I'm now somebody because I can say stuff that people will listen to, but actually, it's a leveling influence, like you've been saying all along. I mean, it homogenizes. If everybody is on Facebook complaining about politics, then nobody's opinion really matters.
I think that we have been talking a lot about identity and new identities or emerging identities, and also about epistemology. So we have to deal with how to think about this, also taking into account that we are also producing or interacting, intra-acting, or whatever we are making also with this, and this was a question posed by Yvonne, and I think it has been also there. So issues of epistemology and how to deal with this, and it is at least for some of us, it is extremely difficult, but there have been some works trying to do that, and I think we should also put this into question for critical science, critical cultural and philosophical perspective.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's what's also come out of the conference from me more and more, and what I wanted to say yesterday also in terms of this discussion about gender. Can we actually still talk about gender? You know, if we take this idea of emergence and interaction seriously, if you like, you know, where does the gender come from that we even start our discussion with?
I feel it. It depends on that. I do feel it so strongly, so every day. And if you feel it, then you have to deal with it. This is why even when you have to try to produce new genders, and knowing that gender is a social construction, but it is also, and this is very powerful, an embodied memory. And I was thinking also in terms of embodied memory for other experiences, you know. It's if you feel it, I do feel it. And then there is a political church in there, and I think Beatriz was trying to say that too. Is I am not going to ignore that I have a label, and there is something that I am reminded every second of the day, all the time.
In terms of the micro deviations proposed by me or others in the project, that implies that you cannot simply pretend that certain very dominant formations or alignments don't exist, because we believe now in another paradigm. That is, we are working from them, potentially opening them up subtly and carefully. If we don't do it subtly and carefully, we might just pretend that they collapse and they still are reconfiguring themselves. So, but of course, imagining possibilities that are exceeding those categories, and still never pretending that we can just neutralize them fully. Maybe
that's, I mean, you know, for all terms and purposes, I'm a woman and I know exactly what you mean, and, you know, I sometimes laugh at my own strategies of how I try and deal with this, how I try to make my own micro deviations every single day, and you know, what kind of responses I get. But for me, it was more yesterday seeing the presentations and also seeing more sort of other discussions on, you know, which have the feminist label in other situations, where for me it's more this sort of, you know, staying in the same loop. And I think the observation I wanted to make on that is just, you know, are we aware, are we really conscious enough that we don't just keep going in the same discursive loop that we've been in for many years on that topic?
Perhaps there is no solution. I think that embodied memory is very good because in regard to what you was discussing, I think it is very much the same in terms of nationalism. It's another sort of identity that has many edges, and I don't know whether there is a solution or you have to tackle with both things at the same time. I want to forget it, but I cannot forget it. And I think we are stuck there. I agree.
You know, I'm sort of looking into the senses and sensorial as, you know, how much does that give us this potential?
I precisely think that, I think that we have had 2-3 decades of post-structuralist loops, of which I have been part of. I come from queer theory and so on, so it's a self-critique that I do there. But this project precisely, I think, it's an attempt to generate something. For example, one of the approaches I do in that respect is I don't say that the body is a text, as many post-structuralists would do, but I say that the text is a body as an emergent process, a body that has infinitesimal variations, a body of movement. So the text is movement. And then, you know, the possibilities for opening up discourse are not just in terms of the structures of what certain analytical paradigms have given us, you know, in terms of semantics and morphology and so on, but, you know, every infinitesimal variations of bodies enacting texts and discourses, all that is opening up discourse to unforeseeable potential. So yes, I think working on movement, on the perception, and I think that is at least how this project proposes to go out of this self-referential loop of discursive formations that one can never seemingly exit. I think that's problematic. I think one can exit them. Never, I don't pretend to exit them like forever. It's not that, but one can generate these openings, these micro-openings. If you work experientially, of course, if you keep just doing your practices, your sensorial practices, then it's perhaps not so easy to do that, or it will happen more minutely.
And if there's some change surrounding you, I mean, why we are in interactions, so it is not a matter of your volition, so to say.
Just a really quick comment on the plan of the White Book. I would suggest that because we have so many various topics, and I don't think your idea is about having some kind of universal ethics on that, but we just should all keep in mind how ethics is connected to the very topics. It is in there already. It's not some other discipline that we won't take a bird's eye view on what we're doing and then say, okay, that's the ethics to it, but more or less try to see how ethics evolve from the things we are talking about. I think this might be a really interesting perspective where we connect all together.
I think it is very clear.
And also, regarding the White Book, maybe it would work well to let us think about it and email you suggestions.
I think the place is great.
Yeah, I
I'm so
collect some of the ideas. I mean,
and then the first list we had, and then some of the ideas that are here.
So I think from now on we could try to collectively work on first the structure, the potential structure of topics of the main, and considering also who, you know, what each of us is working on, what we can provide, and maybe then we will need to call someone specific for some topic which we think is important but which we cannot cover ourselves. But I think first we could exchange now more defined ideas for the major topics that this would need to cover.
Yeah, and following that kind of book structure, and I think it's important also like how the different presentations or papers coming from more literal discussion on like the big data from one perspective, the ones always like having what kind of response we have to that, but from different perspectives, like more artist-based, more different theoretical, different sciences. That could be some way of organizing, not separating, but having that into account. The more literal and more metaphorical relations to the
Considering that, of course, we will do our publications as well, I think the White Book is a political statement. It's something that we want maybe to send to the United Nations, to the European Parliament.
And also the
It's just that this is in the project, we have to do it. Also the publication, we have to do it. But this, we have to do it. It is politically, so it is not an academic publication in one field or several fields or transdisciplinary collaboration. Then there are academic publications.
Right.
Yeah, so we will have to see the tone of it. Like it's not the same as doing an academic publication.
It is a.
This is good you're explaining this, because I didn't get it.
Of course, it's not a manifesto either. We have to even look at other white books, like saying, what kind of text would we provide to United Nations, like telling them, we need a completely new way of thinking of ethics of technology. And then these are our fundamentals as a starting point.
There are good models of white papers online at think tank websites like the Institute for Ethics in Emerging Technology and others, and the Heritage Foundation, if you want a conservative example, and so forth. So maybe we should take a look at
Talking
those
to the
models.
Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technologies would be, since you and I think Stefan is also there,
we're both
some of the
fellows,
people in the project in that institute.
I think it would be interesting to create a small platform so we can co-work from there.
I didn't actually know what a white paper was, so I'm glad to hear you talk a little bit more about it. But would it be framed in terms of an ontology? Would it be that broad at all?
I don't think so.
Well, it must be very broad. It must be this is a statement for the public, for the institutions,
for the media.
Okay. Well, it's for political institutions, for corporations. Like we can send this to Google and say, look, this is what we ask you to have in mind. We can send this to the United Nations and say, look, this is what the European Union, who praised itself for having very strong data protection laws, and we can tell them with this white book, look, your data protection laws are just absolutely rubbish comparing to the kind of topics you should be embraced.
A white paper is, Peggy, more like a recommendation. You outline some problems, and then you give recommendations as a set of experts. That's why think tanks tend to turn them out. In fact, in the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technologies, we've just been approached by a venture capital firm in the United States to produce to do a conference that will produce a white paper to give data, analysis, and recommendations, pretty much in that order. Background data, analysis, and recommendations on technology and unemployment. So they want to know about that, and they'll pay for that. So that's how that kind of works.
This has to be taken into consideration also.
And for example, the more academic publication could be a more in-depth expansion of what we put in the white book in a different kind of language.
What we have to do also to publish at least one academic book. So some of the papers could support also the.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So if we have to kind of reduce our philosophical depth in the white book, this can be then expanded in the other academic publications.
It's right now.
The two audiences are completely different. One is general audience and the other is
Exactly,
academic.
it's different, but it's a good exercise, I think.
But yeah, we can have both being developed in parallel and.
Thank you. I guess there's all the specialists in the room, but there's this Journal of Artistic Research, JAR, where you can, it's peer-reviewed online and it's about creative research practices. And the good thing is that you can publish text and, still images, moving images or whatever, which might be interesting for a sort of intermediate thing, or also in terms of, bridging the sort of public academic divide. Yeah, JAR.
Would you please send it to us?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So, but as I said, I guess, there's people who know much more about this than I do. But just in terms of making it accessible, rather than sort of making it a strict dividing line between academic and public, which of course are the sort of the poles between which you're moving, but maybe make it also iterative so that people have a chance to...
I think this is another possibility in addition to the other, because we have restrictions. One, we have to publish the white book for a big audience. The second, some of us, we are scholars and we cannot allow ourselves to have a publication which is not peer-reviewed and that can count for a career, because it costs a lot of work to publish something. So, in addition to this, I think this can be taken into account. But
yeah, but just in, exactly that in terms of academic publishing. I mean, I've been looking at alternatives because we all know what we mean.
Oh, if you send it to us, this is great. Yeah.
I think this will take a lot of work, and we have to start now because we are racing a huge horizon, and we have to define, see how to develop them, and then see how to then adapt them to this idea of recommendations, outlining the problems.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that we cannot now leave for the future, but really, hopefully, let's see if I manage to send by email before the end of this month the notes from the other day and today, and start exchanges. Or starting in September, first drafts maybe of topics and ideas.
Late September, let's say.
Yes, of course. During September. So.
thank you so much for coming, and your feedback has been incredible. I've learned so much.
Thank you, and I invite you to, we have the first round of metaformances, performances, installations and so forth in Media Lab Metatopia at 4.